He was handsome, well-spoken, a law student with a future. And across the country, Seattle, Colorado, Florida, young women kept disappearing. He was caught. Then he escaped. Twice. When they finally pulled him over, the crowbar and handcuffs in his car told a different story. So who was Ted Bundy, and how did he get away with it for so long? This is Murder at Midnight. It started in Seattle, June 1974. Jorgan was just beginning her journey at college, filled with dreams and hopes for the future. She was a student at the University of Washington and a member of the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. Like many girls her age, she had friends, classes to attend, and exciting plans for summer vacation. However, on one fateful day, everything changed. On June 11th, Jorgan left her sorority house. It was a typical afternoon in Seattle, sunny skies above and laughter echoing through the streets as students buzzed around campus. But somehow, Jorgan never returned home that evening. Her friends began to worry when she didn't show up at their usual spots or answer any calls. As night fell and darkness crept over the city, alarms spread among her peers. They knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Jorgan to simply disappear without telling anyone where she was going. Hours turned into days, and search teams scoured the area around her sorority house, looking for clues but found nothing helpful. The police were called in to investigate. They started piecing together what little information they could find about that day. Witnesses reported seeing Jorgan near her sorority house earlier that evening, but no one saw her leave or where she might have gone after that point. Friends described her as friendly and sociable. She wouldn't have wandered off alone without telling anyone. Days passed with no sign of Jorgan, leaving everyone feeling helpless and fearful. The authorities began to suspect foul play as they delved deeper into their investigation. People living nearby were questioned repeatedly about any suspicious activity they might have noticed on that day. As news spread about Jorgan's disappearance, it shocked not only those close to her but also the larger community in Seattle. How could such a vibrant young woman simply vanish? Events like these rarely happened in neighborhoods like hers. It felt foreign and terrifying. In the following weeks, local newspapers picked up on the story, featuring headlines that drew attention to missing persons cases across Washington state. Dread spread among many residents as they realized this wasn't an isolated incident. More young women had gone missing from nearby areas under strange circumstances. In July 1974, two more women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, disappeared from Issaquah just hours apart during broad daylight. Janice, 23, yet was known for her upbeat personality and love for adventure. That day she had gone to Lake Sammamish. Denise, 19, was eager to make memories during her summer break before heading back to college. She too had gone to the lake. As afternoon faded into evening on July 14th, friends began to worry when Janice didn't return home. Hours later, Denise's absence raised similar alarms. Search efforts ramped up. Flyers were printed across Issaquah. The disappearances were eerily similar to Jorgan's case, young women vanishing while enjoying the simplest pleasures of life. At Lake Sammamish, witnesses reported seeing both near their cars, and some remembered a man who seemed pleasant at first glance but whose intentions remained hidden. The authorities faced mounting pressure as weeks passed with no sign of either woman. Her friends and family clung desperately to hope while grappling with growing dread over what could have happened next, a nightmare scenario unfurling right before their eyes. With no leads emerging from the investigations into both disappearances so close together in time, just miles apart, the fear within Washington state grew palpable like never before. Whispers filled coffee shops. Schools' hallways echoed concern among students about what dangers might lurk outside their doors, now that 3 young lives had been lost without explanation or resolution. Each passing moment intensified anxiety throughout communities nearby as people wondered whether someone might be preying upon innocent victims under cover of darkness, or perhaps driven by darker motives altogether. And no one knew yet who or what lay behind these horrifying events, unfolding around them like shadows creeping over sunny shores. As the shadows grew longer in January of 1975, a new chapter of fear unfolded in Colorado. The small town of Snowmass Village, known for its stunning mountains and serene landscapes, was soon to be marked by tragedy. It was here that Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old woman with bright hopes and dreams, disappeared. Karen had come to the area to enjoy a winter getaway, but her trip took a dark turn. On that fateful day, she had plans to go skiing, a popular activity for visitors in this picturesque location. Friends and family recalled how excited she was about her trip. The thrill of gliding down snowy slopes filled her with joy. But as hours passed without word from Corinne, concern began to seep into the minds of those who loved her. When she didn't return from the slopes that evening, alarm spread. Search efforts began almost immediately. Local authorities rallied together with volunteers from the community, combing through the vast snow-covered terrain. They searched high and low through trees heavy with snow and along winding trails blanketed in white. Hours turned into days as teams tried desperately to locate any sign of Corinne. Despite their best efforts, hope began to fade as time went on. Friends and family waited anxiously for news. The local news picked up on the story, broadcasting updates about Karen's disappearance across Colorado. The small community felt the weight of uncertainty as they held on to hope while grappling with fear. Weeks later, after an exhaustive search effort that seemed endless, a grim discovery shocked everyone involved. Corinne's body was found not far from where she'd vanished. It lay hidden beneath the layers of snow in a remote area near the ski resort where she'd last been seen alive. This heartbreaking revelation sent waves of grief throughout Snowmass Village and beyond. The community struggled to process what had happened. It felt unreal that someone so full of life could vanish so suddenly and tragically. Friends mourned their loss deeply. They spoke fondly about Corinne's laughter and infectious spirit, qualities that made her unforgettable. With her death came many questions. How could this happen? Who would want to harm such a kind soul? As investigators delved deeper into the case, unease settled over not only Snowmass Village but also surrounding areas where people felt increasingly vulnerable. Corinne's tragic end became part of a larger narrative that haunted communities across America during this era, a time when young women were disappearing at alarming rates under mysterious circumstances. Each case seemed connected by an invisible thread woven through fear and sorrow. As whispers grew louder regarding these disappearances, families everywhere found themselves locking doors more tightly at night or keeping their loved ones close during daylight hours when fears emerged like storms brewing on the horizon. Karen Campbell's story is one among many, a reminder of lives ended too soon amid chilling silence, and it remains etched in memory long after those dark winter days have passed. As August settled in, the sun hung high over Utah, casting a warm glow on the bustling streets of Granger. But beneath this calm exterior lay an undercurrent of tension and fear, for many were still haunted by the recent disappearances of young women across the region. It was during this tense time that Ted Bundy's path would take a decisive turn. On August 16th, 1975, Bundy found himself at the centre of a dramatic police chase. Authorities had been alerted to his presence after noticing his suspicious behaviour and swiftly attempted to pull him over. Instead of complying, he sped away, leading officers on a wild pursuit through the streets. His heart raced as he drove recklessly, fully aware that every second brought him closer to capture. Finally cornered by law enforcement, Bundy was apprehended after crashing his car. Officers quickly surrounded him and ordered him out of the vehicle. Resigned to his fate yet still holding on to an air of confidence, he complied without further resistance. As they searched his car, officers uncovered items that sent chills down their spines. A crowbar and handcuffs lay hidden in plain sight. These tools hinted at dark intentions and sinister plans that needed no explanation. The discovery raised alarm bells among investigators who already link Bundy to numerous missing persons cases. They understood that these objects were not just random belongings. They represented a potential glimpse into the mind of a predator who had evaded capture for far too long. In those frantic moments following Bundy's arrest, news spread rapidly through local communities already steeped in fear from previous vanishings. With each passing hour, more people learned about the man whose pleasant manner masked unspeakable horrors. Horrors that seemed almost impossible to comprehend against the backdrop of everyday life. Bundy's arrest marked a pivotal moment, not only for law enforcement, but also for families who had been waiting anxiously for answers regarding their loved ones who had gone missing. The crowbar and handcuffs fueled speculation about what had truly occurred in those tragic cases involving young women like Jorgan Hawkins and Karen Campbell. As authorities delved deeper into Bundy's background following his arrest, they began to piece together troubling patterns associated with his previous encounters with law enforcement, and with victims whose names were now becoming all too familiar among investigators across multiple states. The tension escalated as police realized they might be dealing with one of America's most notorious serial killers, someone capable of luring unsuspecting victims under false pretenses before committing unimaginable acts against them. With Bundy behind bars temporarily while awaiting trial proceedings in Salt Lake City set for early the following year, it became clear that this was just the beginning of exposing a web woven from deceit and malevolence. Every detail mattered now more than ever, as detectives worked tirelessly to connect dots leading back to unsolved disappearances throughout Utah and beyond. The year was 1976, and the atmosphere in Salt Lake City was thick with anticipation. On February 24th, the trial of Ted Bundy began, drawing attention from both the media and the public. People packed the courtroom, eager to witness the proceedings against a man many believed to be behind the horrific disappearances that had plagued several states. Among those present was Carol Durant, a young woman whose harrowing experience would become central to Bundy's case. Carol's story started on a fateful afternoon in November of 1974 when she encountered Bundy while leaving a shopping mall in Murray, Utah. He approached her with a friendly demeanor, pretending to be a police officer. He claimed he needed her help regarding an alleged incident involving her car parked nearby. Trusting his appearance as an authority figure, she hesitated but followed him toward his vehicle. Little did she know that this seemingly harmless encounter would spiral into a terrifying ordeal. As they reached his car, Bundy took control of the situation in an instant. With alarming speed, he grabbed Carol's arm and tried to pull her inside the vehicle. Panic surged through her veins like ice water. She fought back desperately against his strong grip. In that moment of fear and chaos, Carol managed to break free from Bundy's clutches and ran for her life. She sought refuge at a nearby house where she called for help. Now standing before the court as a key witness, Carol took a deep breath as she prepared to recount her experience on the witness stand. Her testimony proved vital not just for her own sense of justice, but also for all those who'd been affected by Bundy's dark actions. She spoke firmly about how he had attempted to abduct her, while portraying himself as someone who could protect rather than harm. As she shared details of that frightful day, every word resonated with those who listened intently in silence. Some were horrified by what they heard, while others felt empathy for this brave woman sharing such personal trauma in front of strangers. The tension in the courtroom grew thick. It became clear that Carol's account would provide critical evidence against Bundy. The prosecutor used Carol's testimony strategically throughout their case against him, showcasing how he manipulated trust and exploited authority, a chilling reminder of how predators often operate under false pretenses. Each time Carol recounted how close she came to being taken by this man, gasps filled the air around her. Even seasoned court watchers found it hard not to squirm at Bundy's calculated cruelty. While Ted Bundy sat there listening impassively as if detached from any responsibility for his actions, everyone else was reminded of something more significant. This trial wasn't just about one person, it was about countless lives altered forever, due to fear and loss brought forth by someone so seemingly ordinary yet undeniably monstrous. The opening day laid bare not only evidence but emotions too. Fear intertwined with hope resonated among those seeking closure, after years filled with dread surrounding their loved ones' disappearances across multiple states, and now here stood one voice willing to speak out against evil itself. On June 7th, 1977, Ted Bundy found himself in the Pitkin County Courthouse in Aspen, Colorado, facing serious charges. The trial had been intense, and tensions ran high. Bundy was aware that many people were convinced of his guilt. He felt the weight of their judgments as if they were heavy stones pressing down on him, yet within him flickered a spark of defiance and cunning that would soon be unleashed. As he sat in the courtroom, Bundy began to plot his escape. He had already shown remarkable intelligence in manipulating those around him, but now he needed to act quickly and decisively. The opportunity arose when he was granted permission to use the law library upstairs, a place where he hoped to find some legal loophole or advantage. But what he really seemed to have in mind was not studying law, but making a break for it. Bundy's heart raced as he climbed the staircase leading up to the second floor. He knew this was his chance. He could feel it tingling through him like electricity. Once inside the library, he scanned the room quickly before making his move. With every second ticking away like a countdown clock, he had to think fast and keep calm. In an astonishing moment of boldness, Bundy decided that a jump from a window could offer him freedom from his chains, both literally and figuratively. Climbing onto a table beside the window, he took one last look around as if committing every detail of this moment to memory before leaping into action. He hurled himself out of that second-story window with all the force and determination he could muster. The world outside rushed toward him as gravity pulled him down. With a thud that echoed through the quiet courtyard below, Bundy hit the ground hard but managed to roll upon landing. An instinct born from years of evasion and escape. Once on solid ground, adrenaline surged through his veins like fire. Pain from his landing barely registered against the thrill of freedom washing over him. Without wasting another moment, Bundy dashed across open spaces, seized weaving through alleyways and avoiding any eyes that might catch sight of him fleeing. His heart pounded with each step as fear mingled with excitement. The very feelings that had motivated many of his past crimes, now driving his desire for survival against all odds. In those frantic moments after escaping from court custody, Ted Bundy reminded everyone just how clever and determined he truly was. For days afterward, news broke about his audacious getaway, and the headlines screamed about it across newspapers throughout Colorado and beyond. The authorities scrambled to recapture him, while communities buzzed with disbelief at how someone so notorious could slip right under their noses yet again. Bundy's escape marked not just a failure on behalf of law enforcement, but also showcased how far he was willing to go for freedom, risking everything in pursuit of it once more. Or this thrilling chapter in his life only fueled public intrigue surrounding him further. People became captivated by both who he was and what heinous acts lay behind that polished exterior. As weeks passed following his daring leap into uncertainty, a calculated risk well executed, Bundy's story continued evolving into something even darker than before. Later that year, Ted Bundy made a bold move that would shake the already tense situation around him. On December 30th, 1977, Bundy escaped from his cell at Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. This was not just a simple breakout, it was a carefully planned action that showcased his cunning and determination. As news of his escape spread, worry gripped the community and law enforcement alike. The prospect of Bundy roaming free sent fear rippling through the townspeople, who had only recently begun to feel a semblance of safety after his arrest. The authorities quickly realized that they had underestimated Bundy's resourcefulness. He had previously shown an ability to manipulate situations to his advantage, whether in court or in prison. His escape raised serious questions about security measures in jails across the state. How could someone so dangerous slip through their fingers? People began to scrutinize every detail of the jail's operations, wondering how they could have allowed such an event to occur. The investigation into Bundy's activities took on a new urgency after he vanished into thin air. Law enforcement agencies ramped up their efforts to find him, conducting searches and working round-the-clock shifts as panic settled over communities where young women had gone missing in recent years. Families feared for their daughters' safety as they kept closer tabs on them than ever before, and Bundy's escape not only complicated the ongoing investigations but also reignited fears about unsolved cases linked to him. The disappearances of young women like Jorgen Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Nasland and Karen Campbell were fresh in everyone's minds. It was as if a dark cloud loomed over those who remembered these tragic stories. Each name represented a life ended too soon, and an unsolved mystery waiting for answers. As time passed without any sign of Bundy being caught again, a anxiety grew among those who lived near the areas where he might strike next. Parents restricted their children's outings more than ever, while local authorities urged vigilance among residents. Families affected by Bundy's past actions felt particularly vulnerable during this time. They held on to hopes that he would be caught soon, but also worried that another innocent life might be endangered due to his freedom. Discussions around town often revolved around increased security measures. More neighborhood watch programs sprang up as people banded together for protection against potential threats lurking just beyond their doors. In addition to creating a sense of fear among the public, Bundy's escape also sparked debates about how society handles criminal justice matters related to repeat offenders and violent crimes. Many began questioning whether enough was being done to protect citizens from individuals like him who displayed alarming patterns of behavior before even committing heinous acts. As law enforcement closed ranks and pursued every lead possible regarding Bundy's whereabouts, it became clear that this man was not just another fugitive. He possessed a disarming demeanor coupled with intelligence that made him all the more dangerous when free from restraints, both literal and figurative. The clock was ticking as investigators raced against time to locate Ted Bundy before he could vanish completely into obscurity once again. Each passing day brought more dread as they wondered what horrific acts he might commit while at large. In January 1978, Ted Bundy started a new chapter in his twisted journey of terror. He moved to Tallahassee, Florida, where he rented a room at a place called The Oak, located near Florida State University. As he settled in, the atmosphere around him began to change. While students buzzed with excitement about their studies and social lives, Bundy lurked in the shadows, ready to strike. This was not just any ordinary move. It was the beginning of a dark time that would haunt many families and communities. Bundy's choice of location proved significant. The university campus was alive with young women, many living away from home for the first time. They were vibrant and full of life, but they were also unaware of the danger that loomed so close by. The streets around the university were filled with chatter and laughter during daylight hours, but as night fell, an unsettling quiet would take over. Bundy saw this as an opportunity. He had always targeted young women who seemed vulnerable and alone, and now he found himself surrounded by them. Just days after his arrival on January 14th, Something dreadful happened at the Chi Omega sorority house nearby. In what would become one of his most notorious attacks, Bundy struck under the cover of darkness. Sorority sisters unwittingly opened their doors to him as he pretended to be someone who needed help, or maybe even someone innocent passing through. That night would see Bundy unleash chaos within those walls, and none could have expected how horrific it would turn out to be. His next victim was Cheryl Thomas, attacked in her own apartment on Dunwoody Street just a day later on January 15th. This brutal incident rattled everyone nearby. Students began looking over their shoulders as they walked across campus or returned home late at night. Fear spread like wildfire among young women, a feeling all too familiar, yet somehow still shocking for those trying to live their daily lives. As news reports surfaced detailing these attacks, authorities scrambled to respond while terrified locals wondered if they had seen anything suspicious or unusual in their neighborhoods. But Bundy blended into his surroundings effortlessly. He was persuasive when needed, and cunning when on the prowl, traits that made him even more dangerous. Despite increased police patrols and warnings about safety measures for college students, Bundy remained at large for some time. His ability to evade capture only fueled his confidence and escalated his violent tendencies as the weeks wore on. Less than a month later, another community would be shattered. Bundy's actions were calculated, where each assault seemed premeditated yet spontaneous enough to catch victims off guard, completely unaware of what lay ahead. An evil lurking behind an ordinary facade that few could recognize until it was too late. Florida State University became a grim reminder that danger can hide in plain sight amidst everyday life, a truth that left scars both visible and invisible long after this chapter closed. The day was February 9th, 1978, a seemingly ordinary morning at Lake City Junior High School in Lake City, Florida. But for Kimberly Leach, the 12th birthday girl who had just recently celebrated her special day, this would turn into a nightmare that would rock the community to its core. As the school bell rang to signal the start of classes, Kimberly's cheerful laughter faded into silence. She stepped out of her classroom for a moment but never returned. Hours passed, and as lunchtime approached, worried teachers began looking for her. When they realized she was missing, alarms went off everywhere. Parents received frantic calls from the school. The news spread quickly through the quiet town like wildfire. Kimberly was just 12 years old. How could she vanish from right under their noses? In a rush to find her, teachers and students searched every nook and cranny of the school grounds. They checked classrooms and hallways and even looked outside on the playground where Kimberly loved to play during recess. But there was no sign of her anywhere. As hours turned into days with no word on Kimberly's whereabouts, fear settled over Lake City like a heavy fog. Families locked their doors tighter than before, keeping their children close by their sides. This wasn't just another missing person case. It felt different, more sinister, as if an unseen hand had reached into their lives and snatched away innocence itself. Local law enforcement sprang into action immediately after learning of Kimberly's disappearance. Officers combed through neighborhoods close to the school, knocking on doors and asking questions about anyone who might have seen something unusual that day. The urgency in their voices echoed throughout the community as they urged residents to report any suspicious activity. Search parties formed with the local volunteers eager to help find Kimberly. Posters with her smiling face flooded street corners and storefronts around town. People gathered in front of banks and grocery stores to discuss what might have happened while clutching flyers tightly in hand. "Have you seen this girl?" they asked each other anxiously. Days turned into weeks without any leads or credible sightings until suddenly whispers began circulating about a man connected with recent events elsewhere. A man whose name sent shivers down everyone's spine. Ted Bundy. The infamous criminal had been known for a likable manner that masked his true nature as a predator, who targeted young women across multiple states. Though he hadn't been directly linked to Kimberly's case yet, residents couldn't shake off feelings of dread that something terrible might be lurking nearby, something related to Bundy himself. With time running out and hope waning thin for many families in Lake City still searching for some glimmer of good news regarding Kimberly's fate, rumors took hold of communities across Florida as officials struggled against anxiety, gripping townspeople everywhere. Would they ever see that bright smile again? Would those joyous giggles return? Little did they know that soon enough, tragedy would strike harder than anyone could have imagined as authorities pieced together chilling details leading toward Bundy's involvement, not just in one, but potentially multiple heinous crimes during this dark chapter in history. As we delve deeper into this chilling story, the tension escalated in February 1978. On the morning of February 15th, Ted Bundy's luck finally ran out. He found himself at the wrong end of a police stop in Pensacola, Florida. This was no ordinary traffic violation. He had been caught driving a stolen car. The authorities had been on high alert due to a string of missing persons and brutal attacks linked to him, and now they had him right where they wanted him. Bundy was not willing to go down without a fight. When officers approached his vehicle, he resisted arrest and attempted to flee the scene. But his efforts were futile. The police subdued him quickly, bringing an end to his desperate attempt to escape justice once more. His arrest marked a significant turning point in the investigation that plagued Florida and beyond. With Bundy in custody, law enforcement began renewed investigations into his activities during the months prior. They sifted through evidence that had accumulated over time. Reports from various missing persons cases and testimonies from survivors who narrowly escaped his grasp. Then each detail began to paint a clearer picture of the man who had haunted so many lives. The atmosphere surrounding Bundy's arrest was one of relief among investigators and local communities alike. After all the chaos he'd caused since moving to Tallahassee just weeks earlier, they finally felt as though they could breathe again, even if just for a moment. However, this relief came with an undercurrent of urgency. They knew this might be their only chance to gather sufficient evidence against him before he could slip away again. In those early hours following Bundy's capture, detectives worked tirelessly. They pored over witness statements and crime scene details related to victims like Cheryl Thomas and Kimberly Leach, whose recent disappearance weighed heavily on their minds. As news spread about Bundy's arrest, families of missing girls clung tightly to hope that perhaps justice would soon be served. Meanwhile, Kimberly Leach's case continued to loom large over everyone involved in the investigation. She disappeared just days before Bundy's arrest. A 12-year-old girl with her entire life ahead of her suddenly snatched away during what should have been an ordinary school day. It became painfully clear that if there was any hope of finding Kimberly alive or discovering what truly happened to her, investigators needed answers fast. Officers began retracing Bundy's steps after arriving in Florida, while examining any connections between him and Kimberly's disappearance. Had he crossed paths with her? Was it merely coincidence that she vanished shortly before his apprehension? Questions swirled endlessly as detectives scoured every inch of evidence available. Bundy sat behind bars now, but remained composed, his poise intact even in captivity, as he awaited questioning about his potential connection to these grim events unfolding around him. It was unsettling how calm he appeared, compared with the panic that gripped those searching for their loved ones. As the weeks after his arrest passed, investigators grew increasingly determined not only for justice but also for closure, both for families affected by Bundy's reign of terror and for themselves as professionals dedicated to protecting their communities from such evil acts. In July of 1978, a significant moment occurred in the long and dark saga of Ted Bundy. On the 21st day of that month, he was indicted for the kidnapping and murder of Kimberly Leach, a 12-year-old girl whose life had been taken far too soon. And this indictment was not just another piece of news, it marked a monumental victory for the prosecutors who had been tirelessly working to build their case against Bundy. With each passing day since Kimberly's disappearance, the weight of evidence against him grew heavier, and now the legal system was ready to take action. Kimberly had vanished from Lake City Junior High School earlier that year on February 9th. Her absence sent shockwaves through her community. Friends and family members searched frantically for her, hoping for her safe return. Sadly, as time passed with no word, hope began to fade. The police investigation intensified as they followed every lead and interviewed anyone who might have seen something unusual that day. Bundy's name emerged during these inquiries due to his already suspicious background and his recent arrest in Pensacola while driving a stolen car. The authorities started connecting the dots between him and Kimberly's tragic fate. The pieces began to fit together like a disturbing puzzle. His history with abduction, his known movements around Florida at the time she went missing, and the testimonies from other victims who had escaped his clutches. As investigators dug deeper into Bundy's life, they uncovered unsettling patterns that hinted at his predatory nature. He was not just a thief or an evader, he embodied danger itself. His demeanour often masked his violent tendencies, allowing him to slip through cracks in the system time and time again. However, this indictment signalled that things were different this time. The law was finally catching up with him. The courtroom buzzed with energy when news broke about Bundy's indictment for Kimberly's murder. Families grieving for lost children found a glimmer of hope amidst their sorrow. Perhaps justice would be served after all. For those who knew Kimberly, this moment brought mixed feelings, a sense of relief but also profound sadness knowing what had happened to such an innocent life. On that day in July 1978, as news outlets reported on the indictment across Florida and beyond, it felt like a turning point. A shift in momentum against one man whose agreeable surface belied an unspeakable darkness within him. Prosecutors stood firm in their resolve as they prepared for what lay ahead. A trial filled with emotional testimony from both survivors and loved ones of victims left behind by Bundy's gruesome actions. This indictment wasn't merely about charging one man, it represented hope for countless victims whose stories remained untold or silenced by fear over so many years. It was about holding accountable someone who thought he could evade justice forever by manipulating others' trust. As prosecutors began laying out their case against Bundy in preparation for the trial proceedings soon after this pivotal moment in July, they understood they were not only fighting for justice for Kimberly Leach, but also paving the way toward truth. A truth about one man's reign of terror that needed to be exposed once and for all. As the trial of Ted Bundy approached, public interest surged like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. People from all walks of life tuned in, as eager to glimpse the man behind the horror that had gripped their nation. Newsstands overflowed with headlines blasting his name, while television sets flickered with updates and courtroom sketches. The more details that emerged, the more captivated the public became. This was not just another trial. It was a case that seemed to encapsulate fear itself. Prosecutors worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence like a puzzle, each piece revealing more darkness about Bundy's past. They wove together testimonies from survivors who had narrowly escaped his grasp, and insights from investigators who had followed his trail of terror across states. One key moment came from Cheryl Thomas, who survived a brutal attack in her own apartment. Her detailed account provided essential clues about Bundy's methods and mannerisms. As she spoke in court, many could feel their hearts race. They could almost see the horror she endured replaying in her mind. Then there was Kimberly Leach. Her story lingered over everything like an ominous shadow. The 12-year-old had gone missing from her school grounds earlier that year. Reports flooded in about her disappearance, but hope quickly turned to despair as weeks passed with no sign of her. When Bundy was finally indicted for her kidnapping and murder on July 21st, it felt as though a collective sigh echoed through communities far and wide. This wasn't just an indictment. It was justice inching closer. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as each witness took their turn at the stand, recounting how Bundy had lured them into his web of deceit. For many attending the trial, it felt surreal to be so close to someone whose actions had incited such fear across multiple states and communities. There were moments when you could hear a pin drop. People leaned forward as if physically drawn into every word spoken against him. Bundy's demeanour during these proceedings baffled many observers. He often sat calmly in his chair, seemingly unaffected by what was unfolding around him. Some speculated he might have enjoyed being at the centre of attention again, a stark contrast to the dread he instilled within others during his reign of terror. As evidence mounted against him, it became clear that this wasn't simply about one man. It represented countless lives shattered by violence and loss. Families who had lived in fear began to see light at the end of this long tunnel, filled with grief and unanswered questions. Outside the courthouse steps, crowds gathered holding placards demanding justice for victims like Kimberly Leach and others taken too soon by Bundy's hands. Each day brought new faces rallying together for change, a testament to how deeply intertwined their lives now were with this case. The public fascination continued to grow not only because of Bundy's horrific deeds, but also due to our innate curiosity surrounding evil itself. What drives someone down such a dark path? The question loomed large over every discussion surrounding him. How could an individual appear so charming on one hand while harbouring such brutality on the other? It prompted endless debates on morality and nature versus nurture. Theories spun wildly, both inside courtrooms and living rooms alike. This trial wasn't just about Ted Bundy anymore. It became emblematic of society's struggle against darkness lurking within humanity itself. As the trial of Ted Bundy unfolded, experts began to dive deep into his mind, trying to understand the man behind the mask. They looked closely at his behaviour, trying to piece together the puzzle of a man who seemed to charm everyone around him, while hiding a dark and twisted side. Bundy was not just a criminal, he was a master manipulator. He had an uncanny ability to blend in, making people trust him easily. It was this skill that allowed him to carry out his horrific acts without raising immediate suspicion. Psychologists analysed Bundy's patterns and tendencies, noting how he often presented himself as polite, intelligent, and even charming. His good looks worked in his favour too. Many described him as handsome or charismatic, allowing him to lure victims without much trouble. But beneath this facade lay a cold-blooded predator who thrived on control and power over others. Experts pointed out that Bundy exhibited classic signs of antisocial personality disorder, traits like deceitfulness and lack of remorse for his actions. The more they studied him, the clearer it became that Bundy's need for manipulation wasn't just about getting what he wanted. It was also about creating fear in those around him. He enjoyed watching people squirm under pressure, or playing mind games with them as if they were pieces on a chessboard. This cruel behaviour only deepened the chilling reality of who he truly was. As evidence mounted against him during the trial, psychologists noted how Bundy reacted differently than most defendants would in such dire circumstances. Instead of showing fear or regret, he often displayed anger or defiance when faced with accusations from witnesses or prosecutors. This led many professionals to believe that he felt above the law, untouchable even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Further analysis revealed something even more disturbing. Bundy's manipulative nature extended beyond just his interactions with potential victims and authorities. It also affected those closest to him. Friends and family members later recounted how he could be warm one moment and cold the next, leaving them confused about who he really was underneath all the layers. then in many ways understanding Ted Bundy meant peeling back these layers one by one until you reach something dark at his core, a void where empathy should have existed but did not. Each interaction left a trail of destruction behind it, a pattern repeating itself throughout his life as if he were drawn toward chaos like iron shavings toward a magnet. As testimonies filled courtroom seats and news cameras captured every moment for eager viewers at home, experts confirmed what many feared. Bundy thrived on being in control while having no regard for human life whatsoever. Each account from survivors painted an image of someone methodical yet unpredictable, a danger lurking just beneath polished surfaces. In this gripping tale woven through years of terror across different states, from Washington down to Florida, Bundy's psychological profile emerged clearer than ever before. A deeply disturbed individual whose compulsions led not only to death, but also left scars on countless lives forever changed by their encounters with evil incarnate. As the trial continued, the painful stories of Bundy's victims emerged. Families of the young women he had taken were not just statistics. They were real people who had loved and been loved. Each victim left behind a space that could never be filled. Grief echoed through the courtroom as parents, siblings, and friends shared their agony. The emotional toll was immense. Birthdays uncelebrated, weddings without their daughters or sisters. In those moments when family members stood to speak about their losses, their voices trembling yet resolute, they helped paint a clearer picture of Bundy's monstrous legacy. And true healing for these families would take much longer than any trial, a lifelong journey marked by scars both visible and hidden. As the trial of Ted Bundy unfolded, a storm brewed in the media. News outlets across the country tuned in, eager to cover every twist and turn of this horrific case. The brutal murders and disappearances of young women had captured the attention of a nation, drawing people into a frenzy of fear and fascination. This was not just another court case. It was a spectacle that gripped America like few others had before. Families of victims spoke out, sharing heart-wrenching tales that brought faces and names to what had previously been statistics. Among them was Jorgen Hawkins, who vanished one summer evening behind her sorority house in Seattle. Her story resonated deeply with many, painting a vivid picture of loss that echoed through the halls of justice. In their grief, families became advocates for their loved ones, demanding justice while struggling to cope with their unbearable pain. The air crackled with tension as reporters flocked to the courtroom like moths to a flame. Every detail about Bundy's life seemed crucial. His charm, his intelligence, even his good looks were dissected by commentators trying to make sense of such evil, wrapped in an attractive package. Viewers at home found themselves glued to their screens or radios as they followed updates on Bundy's trial, from morning until night. People whispered about him at work and school. He became a household name. But beneath all this coverage lay something darker, an unsettling curiosity about how someone could commit such heinous acts without remorse. Discussions filled coffee shops and living rooms across America as ordinary people grappled with questions they never thought they would face. How could someone appear so normal yet be capable of such horror? Many were drawn into Bundy's web like flies caught in sticky traps, and fascinated by his manipulative nature even as they recoiled from his actions. The courtroom itself turned into a theatre where drama played out daily. Each session drew more spectators eager for insight into Bundy's mind and motives. The press reported on every moment, every gasp from the audience when evidence was presented, every flicker of emotion on Bundy's face as he listened to testimonies detailing his victims' lives ripped away too soon. In this chaotic atmosphere, public opinion began to form around Bundy. A mix of horror and morbid curiosity fused together into something almost surreal. Some viewed him as a monster, while others argued there was still more complexity hidden within him. Maybe he wasn't entirely without humanity after all. Such debates fueled discussions online and off, but ultimately shifted focus from the victims' stories back onto Bundy himself. As days turned into weeks, your journalists clashed over how best to portray these events unfolding live before them. Was it ethical to sensationalize tragedy for ratings? Or did bringing awareness serve a greater purpose? Yet amidst this whirlwind, one truth remained clear. Each time another family shared their grief publicly about losing someone precious at the hands of this maniacal killer sent ripples through society's conscience. Our people began gathering outside courthouses, holding signs demanding justice, not only for Jorgan Hawkins, but for all young women who had suffered under Bundy's reign of terror. Those cries echoed throughout cities far beyond Salt Lake City, where trials ran long hours late into dimming evenings filled with emotion too raw for words alone, proving once again that while media can amplify voices lost among chaos, sometimes it also leads us deeper down dark paths we never wish tread upon. As the trial went on, Ted Bundy's polish and quick wit left many people confused. It was hard for some to believe that this man could be a killer. He had an easy smile and spoke with such confidence that it drew people in. Even those who were following the case closely found themselves taken in by his persona. How could someone so polished and articulate be responsible for such horrific acts? This conflict between his outward appearance and his dark actions created a strange tension in the courtroom and beyond. Bundy had a knack for making people feel comfortable around him. He often dressed well, maintaining a neat appearance that conveyed intelligence and sophistication. His calm demeanour added to this illusion of normalcy, masking the chaos he left in his wake. When he entered the courtroom, heads turned. Many watched with curiosity rather than fear, as some even saw him as an intriguing figure rather than a monster. The media also played into this perception. News anchors often highlighted Bundy's good looks and charisma, almost romanticizing him instead of focusing solely on his crimes. This attention fed the public's fascination with him, turning Bundy into something of a celebrity against the backdrop of tragedy. While families mourned their lost loved ones, many others were captivated by the spectacle surrounding his trial. People would talk about him at dinner tables or while waiting in lines at stores, debating how someone like Bundy could commit such terrible acts. His intelligence seemed to confuse them further. They couldn't reconcile how someone so clever could also be capable of unfathomable evil. The questions lingered. Was he truly guilty? Did he even understand what he had done? For many watching from afar, these questions became more important than the victims themselves. As Bundy's trial continued, and as testimonies began to paint an even darker picture of who he really was beneath that polished exterior, victims' accounts showed not just fear, but sheer terror during their encounters with him. Carol Durant's testimony stood out as she described her own brush with death when she met Bundy under false pretenses. He posed as a police officer trying to help her before attempting to kidnap her. Still, there were those who remained skeptical about his guilt due to the way he carried himself during proceedings. His calmness almost felt like innocence wrapped in charisma. Friends and acquaintances who had known him before all this came forward, sharing stories filled with laughter and camaraderie, unable to connect that joyful past with the horror unfolding now. This duality became central to discussions around Bundy, as it sparked debates over nature versus nurture, or simply how one person could embody both light and darkness so perfectly at once. Every day brought more revelations about his gruesome crimes that contradicted this image. The brutal attacks on young women across states from Washington to Colorado created an overwhelming contrast between what was seen in courtrooms and what transpired behind closed doors. All these elements combined formed a complex portrait of Ted Bundy, a man whose very existence seemed like a riddle wrapped in enigma, and every new detail only deepened this confusion among those watching from afar. As the trial came to an end, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone awaited the jury's decision. Ted Bundy sat calmly at the defense table, his expression a mix of confidence and defiance, and his charm had captivated many during the proceedings, but now it all hinged on what the jury would decide. After days of deliberation, they finally returned with their verdict: guilty. The news rippled through the room like a shockwave. Families of victims wept tears of relief and sorrow, knowing that justice had been served for their loved ones taken too soon. But for Bundy, this was just another chapter in his elaborate game. He maintained his innocence with a stubbornness that seemed almost theatrical. Even after being found guilty on multiple counts, he continued to spin tales designed to confuse and mislead those around him. To many observers, it felt like he was trying to rewrite history right there in front of them. His calm demeanour and refusal to accept responsibility allowed him to keep manipulating the narrative even as he faced harsh consequences. Where in interviews and press statements following his conviction, Bundy painted himself as a misunderstood figure caught up in circumstances beyond his control. He claimed that evidence against him was circumstantial, or planted by police eager to close cases quickly. This twisting of facts left some people unsure about how culpable he really was. His charm still worked its magic on many who watched from afar. As he spent more time behind bars awaiting sentencing, Bundy's manipulation only intensified. He became known for holding court-like discussions with fellow inmates and journalists who sought insight into his mind. These conversations often devolved into grandiose claims about how society had failed him, or how he was merely a scapegoat for deeper issues within law enforcement. The media ate it up, fascinated by this man who danced between good looks and evil acts. This enigma known as Ted Bundy, who had captured their imagination yet again. Each time he spoke publicly about his case, it reignited debates among experts and casual listeners alike regarding guilt versus innocence in high-profile cases like his. Victims' families were left grappling not only with their grief, but also with Bundy's relentless attempts to shift blame away from himself. They struggled to understand how someone could be so unrepentant despite overwhelming evidence against him. How could such a charming man also be capable of such horrific crimes? It felt cruelly ironic that Bundy's charisma still managed to sway opinions even after all that had happened. The courtroom drama may have concluded with a guilty verdict, but in many ways Bundy's story continued on through his words and actions behind bars, a chilling reminder that true crime does not end when justice is supposedly served. Sometimes it morphs into something darker yet again as one person seeks to control how their tale is told, long after the final gavel falls. The day the verdict was read was a turning point, one that would be etched in the minds of all who were present. The tension in the courtroom remained thick as the jury filed in, their faces unreadable. When they settled into their seats, silence enveloped the room, broken only by the rustle of papers and the quiet shuffling of feet. Everyone leaned forward, breaths held tight in anticipation. Ted Bundy sat at the defense table with an unsettling calmness that belied the storm brewing around him. His eyes scanned the room, taking in every face before finally resting on those of his victims' families. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The foreman stood and announced that Bundy was guilty on all counts. Gasps broke out among some spectators while others wept quietly, relief and grief mingling together. It was a long-awaited moment for many who had suffered so deeply because of Bundy's actions. Yet as soon as he heard those words, something strange happened. Bundy's expression shifted from stoic to defiant almost instantly. In that charged atmosphere filled with raw emotion, Bundy rose to speak despite his lawyer's attempts to hold him back. He declared loudly that he was innocent and claimed he would never accept blame for things he did not do. The courtroom erupted again. A disbelief painted across many faces turned to anger and confusion. It seemed impossible that someone could stand there after being found guilty and still maintain such an air of confidence. While some people saw this as a desperate act from a man cornered by his own deeds, others were captivated by Bundy's charisma even at this low point. His voice rang clear and steady as he continued to assert his innocence. Weaving tales meant to confuse those listening. Stories meant to cast doubt upon everything they had just witnessed throughout the trial. Bundy's reaction shocked not just those sitting in judgment, but also legal experts following closely from afar. Many had anticipated some level of remorse or acceptance, but instead witnessed a masterclass in manipulation right before their eyes. The walls around him might have been closing in due to undeniable evidence presented during weeks of testimony. Yet here he was, a man seemingly made invulnerable by his own delusions. As news outlets rushed to cover this twist in the saga, pundits debated what it meant for justice and how someone like Bundy could still find power even when stripped of freedom. In interviews afterward, victims' families expressed their outrage and disbelief at how someone could remain so detached from reality amid such overwhelming evidence against him. And Ted Bundy's fate now rested squarely with the judge who would determine what punishment awaited him next. A sentence that carried weight far beyond mere years behind bars or even life imprisonment. It loomed over him like a shadow waiting patiently for its chance to consume him completely. For many observers outside courtrooms across America, this was more than just another high-profile case. It symbolized a struggle between light and darkness, where evil wore an unsettling mask crafted through charm and intellect, while hiding something far more sinister beneath its surface. In the dim light of his cell, Ted Bundy found himself in a world stripped of freedom. The days bled into one another as he awaited his fate on death row. It was an existence marked not by the thrill of escape or the games he had once played, but by a heavy silence that pressed down on him like a weight. Here, behind bars, he faced the ghosts of his past, faces of those he had taken and lives he had shattered. Yet, even in this dark place, Bundy showed no signs of remorse for his actions. He remained convinced that he was more than what society painted him to be. As time passed, Bundy's thoughts drifted back to his earlier life. He recalled moments when charm and wit opened doors for him. In school and social circles, people were drawn to him. They admired his intelligence and charisma. But now, locked away in isolation, those traits felt like distant memories, replaced by a cold reality that left no room for self-pity or reflection on accountability. Bundy often wondered how it all spiraled out of control. His mind wandered through the paths he'd taken, the decisions that led him down a dark road where violence became second nature. So he thought about Jorgan Hawkins' disappearance from Seattle and the fear it instilled in her family. Janice Ott and Denise Naslund going missing just hours apart. Karen Campbell's life ended too soon in Colorado, and Kimberly Leach's tragic end at just 12 years old. Each name echoed in the corners of his mind while he sat alone with nothing but time to contemplate. Even as he reflected on these horrors, Bundy's sense of superiority never faltered, and he believed himself to be smarter than everyone else around him, a master manipulator who could bend narratives to his will. He often spoke with reporters who visited him on death row, weaving tales that left them both fascinated and horrified. To some extent, he enjoyed this attention. It allowed him to continue playing the role of an enigmatic figure even as death loomed closer. Though many sought closure through forgiveness or understanding why someone could commit such acts, Bundy remained steadfast in denying any real guilt or remorse for what he'd done. Instead of grappling with feelings of sorrow over the lives lost due to his hand, he crafted stories about being misunderstood, an innocent man trapped in a game larger than himself. The clock ticked loudly within those prison walls as days turned into nights filled with endless reflections upon choices made long ago, choices that would seal his fate forever. While others may have succumbed to despair under similar circumstances, Bundy's defiance only hardened over time. The impending execution did not frighten him. Rather, it fueled a fire within, a last chance to manipulate perceptions one final time before facing judgment. In those final days leading up to January 24th, the day scheduled for his execution, Bundy clung fiercely to this facade of innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. Even with law enforcement breathing down his neck and victims' families waiting for justice at long last, Ted Bundy continued playing chess with life itself from behind bars, a desperate effort not just for survival, but also for legacy. As Ted Bundy awaited his fate in the quiet confines of death row, society began to reckon with the deep scars left by his actions. Experts and scholars started to analyze not just Bundy's crimes, but also their broader impact on law enforcement and community safety. The nation was shaken to its core as families grappled with the horror of losing loved ones to such a calculated predator. Each victim's story echoed through the news cycle, creating a narrative that was impossible for many to forget. The media frenzy surrounding Bundy's trial had captured the public's attention like nothing seen before. His charm and intelligence led many to believe he was more than just a killer. He was a master manipulator who could twist reality with his words. This bewilderment fueled a discourse about evil, making people question how someone so seemingly normal could commit such heinous acts. In the aftermath of Bundy's conviction, experts began discussing necessary changes in how law enforcement approached investigations. The brutal truth of Bundy's series of abductions highlighted significant flaws in police procedures across the country. Many officers were unprepared for a suspect who could blend into society while committing unspeakable crimes. They realized that traditional methods were inadequate when it came to hunting down a killer who exploited weaknesses within the justice system itself. The trial prompted discussions about victim advocacy and support systems for families affected by violent crime. Advocates pushed for better communication between different jurisdictions, emphasizing that many of Bundy's victims had disappeared in various states without proper coordination among local police departments. It became clear that an isolated approach wouldn't work against an offender as mobile as Bundy, who travelled across state lines while evading capture. Moreover, there was increasing pressure on lawmakers to reform laws related to sexual predators and their tracking systems. The idea of keeping tabs on offenders became paramount after revelations about Bundy's history of escape and evasion during prior arrests. Experts pointed out how crucial it was for law enforcement to share information swiftly and effectively, especially when dealing with individuals known for manipulating legal loopholes. Public awareness surged as discussions around safety measures gained momentum. Communities rallied together, forming neighbourhood watch programs and advocating for better education on personal safety, especially for women and young people targeted by predators like Bundy. Schools began implementing programs focused on self-defense and awareness techniques aimed at preventing future tragedies from occurring. This collective response showcased society's determination not only to seek justice, but also to ensure that such horrors would never happen again. Over time, these conversations shaped policies that aimed at protecting vulnerable populations from predators lurking within everyday life. Bundy's legacy became more than just one man's monstrous acts. It transformed into a catalyst for change within law enforcement practices nationwide. As communities reflected on these profound shifts brought forth by fear and tragedy, they slowly forged paths toward healing, seeking solutions born from pain, yet driven by an unwavering resolve never to forget those lost too soon. As the years passed, the chilling legacy of Ted Bundy continued to hang over communities like a dark cloud. His crimes had left deep marks on the very fabric of society across several states. Families mourned not just for their lost loved ones, but also for a sense of safety that was shattered forever. The fear that gripped towns and cities from Washington to Florida was palpable, and it prompted people to look at their surroundings in a new light. In Washington, where Jorgen Hawkins vanished behind her sorority house, young women began to change their routines. No longer did they feel comfortable walking alone at night or sitting on porches with friends after dark. Instead, there was an unspoken agreement among them. Safety came first. The disappearance of Janice Ott and Denise Naslund only intensified these feelings. They were reminders that danger lurked even in familiar places. Parents became more protective, urging their daughters to stay close to home and avoid risky situations. Meanwhile, as news spread of Bundy's crimes from one state to another, the fear extended beyond individual towns. In Colorado, Corinne Campbell's tragic fate echoed through the mountains, where she'd disappeared. Her body found weeks later ignited discussions about vulnerability and victimhood among young women everywhere. These stories crossed state lines, creating a network of anxiety that reached far beyond the locations where Bundy's act had taken place. When Bundy was arrested in Utah after a chase with police, communities felt a mix of relief and dread. They were relieved that he was caught, but anxious about how many others might still be out there. Criminals who could slip through the cracks just like Bundy once did. As he faced trial for his crimes, Carol Duranche's testimony painted a stark picture of his manipulative nature, a man who could charm his way into a victim's life while hiding his true self. The escape from custody in Colorado only added fuel to this fire of fear. If someone like him could elude justice so easily, what hope did others have? It served as a grim reminder that evil often hides behind friendly faces. When Bundy finally made headlines again in Florida after moving there and committing further atrocities, including attacking women near Florida State University, the nation shuddered anew. The brutal murders of Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy sent shockwaves through college campuses everywhere, forcing students to rethink their daily lives amid rising panic. In those halls where laughter once echoed freely now hung an air thick with caution and suspicion. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every stranger potentially threatening. Communities banded together in response. They organised self-defence classes for women and initiated neighbourhood watch programmes aimed at keeping everyone safe from potential predators lurking on the fringes. Schools held assemblies warning students about personal safety, while encouraging open conversations about fears and anxieties stemming from Bundy's crimes. Even years later, as people moved on with their lives, his impact lingered like an unwelcome ghost haunting those areas he touched with tragedy. News reports revisited old cases periodically as families sought closure for unresolved disappearances, connected back to him or similar predators who followed in his wake. Ted Bundy may have met his end by electrocution in 1989 at Florida State Prison, but the legacy he left behind, the lasting scars on communities struggling to reclaim normalcy, remains vivid today. Each story continues to remind us all. Vigilance is essential when confronting darkness hidden within human nature. As the dark shadow of Ted Bundy's actions hung over society, there were voices rising from the depths of despair. Survivors of his terror began to share their stories, tales filled with both fear and incredible strength. Their experiences shone a light on resilience, showing how they managed to reclaim their lives despite the horrors they faced. One such survivor was Carol Duranche. She spoke of that fateful day in 1974 when a man approached her, pretending to be a police officer. He had charm and confidence, but she sensed something was off. Carol recalled how she fought back fiercely when he tried to pull her into his car. She used every ounce of strength she had, screaming and kicking until she broke free. Her bravery didn't just save her life, It provided crucial evidence against Bundy during his trial. Then there was Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, two young women who endured unimaginable trauma that night at the Chi Omega sorority house in Tallahassee in January 1978. They remembered waking up to chaos as Bundy invaded their sanctuary, attacking them while they slept. Yet, against all odds, both survived the brutal assault. Kathy described how she felt like a ghost roaming through her own life for months afterward, struggling with nightmares and panic attacks. But eventually she found strength in sharing her story with others who had suffered similar experiences. Their stories ignited hope among those who listened. Each woman's journey reflected not only survival, but also determination to move forward despite their pasts. Carol became an advocate for victims' rights and helped educate others about safety measures against predators like Bundy. Cheryl Thomas also shared her experience from that terrifying night when Bundy attacked her in her apartment on Dunwoody Street in Tallahassee, just days after the sorority house incident. Cheryl recounted feeling utterly helpless as he came at her with malicious intent, but then finding a way to fight back through sheer willpower and instinctive survival skills. And these survivors did not merely exist. They thrived by telling their truths and supporting one another in healing processes that seemed impossible at first glance. They inspired others facing similar battles to believe in their own strength. Years later, as they looked back on those moments of terror, each woman found solace in knowing that sharing their stories could prevent future tragedies. They formed communities dedicated to empowerment and education about personal safety, turning pain into purpose. The message was clear. Resilience is born from struggle. It grows stronger every time someone stands up against fear or pain inflicted by another person's evil intentions. The courage these women displayed became a beacon of hope for countless others who might one day find themselves facing darkness. In reflecting on their harrowing experiences, the survivors reminded us all that even amidst unspeakable horror lies an unbreakable spirit waiting to rise again and again. In the wake of Ted Bundy's horrifying crimes, the world began to change in ways that many could never have imagined. As survivors bravely shared their stories, a collective awareness emerged among communities. This wasn't just about the past, it was about safety and vigilance in a world that had suddenly become much darker. People began to realize that danger could lurk where they least expected it, even from someone who seemed charming or trustworthy. Before Bundy struck fear into the hearts of so many individuals felt secure walking alone at night or engaging with strangers. But after hearing horrific tales of abduction and violence, a sense of caution crept into daily life. Women started to pay closer attention when out in public, often looking over their shoulders as they walked home or parked their cars. The idea of safety took on a new meaning, one filled with uncertainty and fear. As news spread about Bundy's crimes across various states, an urgent call for increased awareness became evident. Safety measures previously thought unnecessary became crucial. Schools implemented programs teaching young people how to stay safe and recognize potential threats. Parents began having serious conversations with their children about stranger danger, emphasizing the importance of being aware and cautious. Communities organized workshops and self-defense classes to empower individuals, especially women, to protect themselves if ever faced with danger. It was a time when neighbors looked out for one another more than ever before. They formed watch groups, sharing information about suspicious activity in their areas. The simple act of walking down the street transformed from an everyday routine into a calculated process filled with precautions. The impact was not solely physical, it also seeped deeply into social interactions. Trust began to wane as people grew more guarded around others. Friendships shifted as whispers of doubt lingered beneath casual conversations. Even those who had once been friendly found themselves questioning motives behind kind gestures or spontaneous offers for help. And as in schools and universities, discussions about gender safety took centre stage as students banded together to advocate for better protection measures on campuses. The tragic events surrounding Bundy prompted institutions to reconsider how they approach security, changing lighting in parking lots, establishing emergency call systems, and implementing stricter visitor policies all became part of the landscape. Additionally, law enforcement agencies recognized that capturing Bundy was only part of the solution. Preventing future tragedies required community involvement and transparency between police departments and citizens alike. Relationships were built on trust again, a necessity born from tragedy, but also accompanied by fears that permeated through every neighborhood affected by his actions. The legacy left behind by Bundy's crimes reshaped societal norms around personal safety. What once felt like simple freedoms soon evolved into cautious decisions regarding every aspect of life, from late-night outings to trusting new acquaintances. As survivors continued sharing their experiences publicly, they sparked dialogues that encouraged others to confront fears head-on rather than remaining silent victims buried under shame or trauma. That a resilience emerged not just within them, but across communities yearning for healing while grappling with newfound realities surrounding crime prevention efforts nationwide. On January 24, 1989, a significant chapter in American crime was brought to an end. Ted Bundy, the man whose name had become synonymous with terror and manipulation, was executed by electrocution at Florida State Prison in Stark. This moment marked not just the conclusion of his life, but also an important turning point in how society viewed safety and justice. For many, Bundy's death was a long-awaited moment of closure. For others, it stirred up complicated feelings that mixed relief with lingering fear. As the clock ticked down to the execution, emotions ran high across the nation. Some felt a sense of justice being served. They believed Bundy's crimes had caused too much pain and suffering to be allowed to continue living. Victims' families gathered with a heavy heart, but also a glimmer of hope that this act might somehow bring peace to those who had lost so much. The victims, young women like Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, were often remembered not just for their tragic ends, but for their vibrant lives before they crossed paths with Bundy. In stark contrast, there were those who questioned whether killing Bundy would genuinely change anything. Some argued that capital punishment was not the answer. It raised debates about morality and ethics that echoed through courtrooms and homes alike. To them, taking another life did not erase all the horror he had inflicted on so many innocent people. It was a divisive issue that sparked conversations far beyond the prison walls. Bundy's execution itself was shrouded in secrecy typical of such events. Witnesses included prison officials and family members of victims, but even they could not fully grasp what this moment meant on a broader scale. As he faced his fate, Bundy reportedly met his end without showing any signs of remorse for his actions. He had always maintained an air of confidence even when confronted with overwhelming evidence against him. It seemed fitting that he would leave this world as defiantly as he had lived in it. News broadcasts covered every angle of the event. Live reports from outside the prison, showcasing crowds gathered to witness history unfold or protest against capital punishment altogether. Mixed reactions poured in as people reflected on what Bundy's life represented. A dark shadow that loomed over generations yet also sparked critical dialogues about personal safety, criminal psychology, and societal responsibility. After his execution, communities began to process what Bundy's crimes had meant for their future safety measures. Law enforcement agencies took note. New training programs emerged focused on identifying potential threats more efficiently and enhancing public awareness about personal security tactics. Neighborhood watch groups formed more frequently as citizens rallied together to protect one another from danger lurking just beneath the surface. The legacy left by Ted Bundy did not solely belong to him. Instead, it became intertwined with lessons learned by survivors who lived through nightmares no one should ever have faced. They became advocates for change due to their experiences. Their voices grew louder in discussions about safety protocols at schools or public places where young women often found themselves vulnerable. Ultimately, while Ted Bundy's life ended on that fateful day in January 1989, mere conversations around his crimes continued long after he left this world. Society's struggle between seeking justice and understanding its implications remained alive as people worked tirelessly towards creating safer environments for future generations. After Ted Bundy's death on January 24th, 1989, the air was thick with mixed emotions across the country. For many, his execution brought a sense of relief and closure. People gathered in small groups outside Florida State Prison, some holding candles and flowers, while others cheered loudly, relieved that the man who had haunted their lives for so long was finally gone. His name had become a symbol of fear and violence, and now that chapter was closed. Yet, there were also those who mourned, not for Bundy himself, but for the lost lives he'd taken and the families left to pick up the pieces. In homes across America, families found themselves discussing Bundy's crimes in a way they hadn't before. As survivors of his attack spoke out more publicly than ever. They shared their harrowing tales on television shows and news reports. Their stories revealed not just pain, but incredible strength as they reclaimed their voices after years of silence. There was power in their words. They became advocates for victims everywhere. As news spread about Bundy's execution, social media began to buzz with reactions from people who either celebrated or condemned what had just happened. Some argued that it would never bring back the innocent lives lost to his terror, a sentiment echoed by family members of his victims who felt conflicted over whether justice had truly been served. Others believed that capital punishment was necessary to ensure that someone like Bundy could never hurt anyone again. Among those reflecting on Bundy's demise were law enforcement officials who had spent years tracking him down and bringing him to justice. They recalled the horrifying details of his crimes, the young women abducted from college campuses or lured into his car under false pretenses, and how each one left a scar on society's consciousness. The police were seen as heroes by some for apprehending such a dangerous figure, yet even they wrestled with feelings of inadequacy. Could they have saved more lives if only they'd caught him sooner? The changes in society following Bundy's reign of terror were also palpable. Parents became more vigilant about their children's safety. Schools started offering self-defense classes for young girls. Communities held meetings focused on awareness and prevention strategies against potential dangers lurking nearby. The fear he instilled led to stronger dialogues around women's safety everywhere. Yet through this bittersweet aftermath lay another thread, a sense of resilience emerging from tragedy. As memorials grew in honor of Bundy's victims, people began sharing stories not just about loss but also about hope. They focused on celebrating life instead of being consumed by grief or anger at Bundy's actions. As months turned into years after his execution, discussions around mental health gained ground too. How someone could commit such horrors often pointed back to deeper issues within society itself regarding understanding psychology and providing help to those struggling with dark thoughts. In classrooms across America today, teachers use history lessons about Ted Bundy not only as cautionary tales but also as opportunities to discuss empathy toward victims and survivors alike, learning moments that aim to prevent future tragedies rather than simply recounting past horrors. Bundy's death marked not just an end but a beginning, a chance for society to heal while keeping alive the memories of those whose lives were forever altered by one man's monstrous actions. As the dust settled on the events of January 24th, 1989, the people across the nation found themselves grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. Ted Bundy's execution had marked the end of a long and dark chapter in American history. Yet, while many felt relief that this notorious figure was finally gone, others struggled to make sense of it all. The complexities of justice lay bare before them. What did it really mean to serve justice? Was executing Bundy truly a victory for the victims, or just another layer added to an already tangled web of pain and suffering? In the days following his death, news outlets flooded with stories analysing public reactions. Some celebrated outside Florida State Prison, lighting candles and sharing memories of those lost to Bundy's cruelty. For them, his death felt like a long-awaited reckoning. They believed that justice had been served, that by taking Bundy's life, and society had reclaimed some measure of control over its own safety and moral order. But not everyone shared this sentiment. Many questioned whether killing Bundy was an act of justice, or simply revenge masked as righteousness. Families still mourning their loved ones struggled with feelings they could hardly put into words. How could anyone find closure in a system that seemed to perpetuate violence? Each family member carried scars that no amount of punishment could heal. Scars left by abductions, murders, and shattered lives. The media also played its part in shaping public discourse about justice after Bundy's execution. Analysts dissected every angle. Did he deserve mercy? Was there room for forgiveness in such horrific circumstances? These questions ignited debates across homes and communities nationwide. In classrooms and cafes alike, conversations sparked about morality versus legality. Some argued that capital punishment is a necessary deterrent against heinous acts, a way to ensure that individuals like Bundy would never harm anyone again. Others believed it was fundamentally flawed. Ending a life could never undo the loss caused by that life in the first place. Moreover, discussions turned toward how society views violent crimes today, compared to before Bundy's reign of terror began in the mid-1970s. With each story surfacing from survivors and families affected by his actions, listeners were reminded that these tragedies didn't end with an execution. They continued living on through countless untold struggles faced daily. The aftermath wasn't just confined to those directly impacted by Bundy's actions, but rippled out into broader societal changes as well. Law enforcement agencies scrutinized their practices and protocols regarding missing persons cases and sexual violence prevention measures anew, determined not only to capture criminals, but also to protect potential victims from ever having to endure what so many had suffered during Bundy's spree. In reflecting on this complex tapestry, woven from threads of trauma, healing, vengeance, and societal evolution, one thing became clear: justice is far more than simply punishing wrongdoers or marking an end date on their lives. It involves understanding deep-rooted issues at play within human behavior and societal structures themselves. Ultimately, Ted Bundy's story serves as both a cautionary tale about evil lurking within humanity's shadows and a call for reflection on what true justice means, challenging us all to confront uncomfortable truths while seeking paths toward healing for those left behind. As the nation grappled with the implications of Ted Bundy's execution, it became clear that his heinous actions had far-reaching effects on how law enforcement approached criminal investigations. The horror of his crimes pushed police departments and investigators to rethink their strategies and adopt new methods. It was a wake-up call for many who were responsible for keeping communities safe. Before Bundy, those missing persons cases often received little attention unless they involved certain demographics or circumstances. But as Bundy's pattern of abductions came to light, it became evident that anyone could fall victim to such brutality. This realization led to a more inclusive approach in investigating disappearances. No longer would officers overlook cases simply because they didn't fit a mold. Every report began to be taken seriously. Investigators started learning from Bundy's tactics. His ability to blend in, charm his victims, and then commit unspeakable acts forced law enforcement agencies to develop profiles of potential offenders. They began using psychological profiling techniques that focused on understanding the mindset of criminals like Bundy. Knowledge gained from behavioral science started playing a crucial role in identifying suspects before they could strike again. Additionally, communication between different police departments improved significantly. In the past, jurisdictions often operated independently, making it easy for criminals like Bundy to slip through the cracks as he moved from one state to another. After his arrest and the chaos surrounding his trial, agencies recognized the need for better coordination across borders. This change included sharing information about suspects and trends in criminal behavior, which ultimately helped them catch serial offenders much sooner than before. Another lesson learned revolved around victim support and advocacy. Survivors of Bundy's attacks bravely came forward to share their stories, shedding light on not only their suffering but also the resilience they displayed afterward. Their voices prompted law enforcement officials and lawmakers alike to consider more comprehensive support systems for victims' families and survivors of violent crimes. Public awareness surged after Bundy's trials. People became more vigilant about safety practices in everyday life. The chilling reality that someone could appear trustworthy yet commit horrible acts led communities to rally together around safety initiatives. Schools began teaching students about personal safety, while parents grew more cautious about their children's whereabouts. Moreover, organizations devoted themselves to preventing violence against women and children sprang up as a direct response to the terror brought by Bundy's actions. Communities organized workshops aimed at educating individuals on how to stay safe and recognize red flags in potentially dangerous situations. In essence, Bundy's horrific legacy forced society into action, one that sought justice not just for those harmed, but also aimed at preventing future tragedies from occurring again. The lessons learned from this dark chapter shaped future criminal investigations profoundly. They were no longer just about catching someone after the fact, but rather preventing such horrors from happening in the first place. This evolution reflected a broader understanding of crime prevention. It was not enough merely to react, but essential also to plan ahead with foresight and care. As the dust settled from the shocking events surrounding Ted Bundy, experts began to delve into his mind, and us trying to piece together the puzzle of his motives. What drove a seemingly charming and intelligent man to commit such brutal acts? The exploration of Bundy's psychological profile became a crucial part of understanding not just his crimes, but also the very nature of evil itself. Many psychologists pointed to Bundy's early life as a starting point. He was born in 1946 in Vermont and raised in a family that faced its own struggles. Some argued that Bundy grew up feeling unwanted and confused about his identity. They suggested that this might have sowed the seeds for his later behavior. Experts noted how he often portrayed himself as a victim, using charm and deceit to manipulate those around him. Bundy had an uncanny ability to fit into different social circles, which allowed him to gain trust easily before revealing his darker side. One prominent psychologist highlighted Bundy's exceptional intelligence, that he excelled academically and was well-spoken, traits that made it difficult for many to believe he was capable of such horrific actions. This facade allowed him to evade suspicion for far longer than anyone thought possible. Psychologists also noted that Bundy thrived on control. He enjoyed being able to dictate every aspect of his victims' lives during their final moments. The nature of Bundy's crimes, predominantly against young women, further complicated any straightforward analysis. Yet experts discussed how societal attitudes towards women during the 1970s might have played into his motivations. Many believed that Bundy's actions were partially driven by underlying misogyny, a desire to exert power over those he viewed as vulnerable. Adding another layer, some researchers examined what they called the thrill factor. For many serial killers, the act of killing becomes an addiction, providing an adrenaline rush unlike anything else. They speculated whether this was true for Bundy as well. Perhaps each abduction brought him closer to an exhilarating high that fed his insatiable urges. In one chilling analysis, experts pointed out how Bundy often revisited crime scenes after committing them. This behaviour suggested not just a need for control, but also a perverse enjoyment in reliving the horror he inflicted on others. His ability to compartmentalise these feelings fascinated professionals studying criminal psychology. The question remained, could anyone ever truly understand why someone like Ted Bundy committed such heinous acts? As investigations into other criminals continued, many hoped insights gained from studying Bundy would provide clues essential for stopping future predators before they could strike again. This quest for understanding extended beyond academia. It influenced law enforcement strategies across the country. The sheer terror unleashed by Bundy's actions prompted police departments nationwide to rethink their approaches toward missing persons, cases, and violent crimes against women, an evolution sparked directly by one man's horrifying legacy. While discussions about justice were complex, examining Ted Bundy's psychological makeup helped unravel some threads woven deep within society's fabric, threads connecting fear, power dynamics, and humanity's darker impulses. It remains essential to remember those whose lives were taken, not as statistics, but as people with names, families, and futures. We have already spoken of them in this story. Their absence left voids that could never be filled. As the story of Ted Bundy unfolded in the public eye, media played a huge role in shaping his image. The way news outlets reported on his crimes and trials had a significant impact on how people viewed him. Some saw him as a charming man, almost like a character from a movie, while others recognized the monster he truly was. This conflicting portrayal made it hard for many to grasp the reality of his actions. In the beginning, many news stories focused on Bundy's good looks and intelligence. He was often described as charismatic, which only added to his mystique. Headlines sometimes read like they were promoting a celebrity, rather than reporting on someone accused of horrific crimes. While victims' families were left shattered, Tim Bundy was practically glamorized by some sections of the media. As reporters flocked to cover each trial and hearing, Bundy's charm seemed to captivate them even more. They highlighted how he would dress well in court and sometimes even smile at cameras. This attention allowed him to manipulate public perception, making some believe that perhaps he wasn't really capable of such evil acts. It was unsettling how easy it was for people to overlook his monstrous behavior by focusing instead on superficial traits. The media frenzy grew intense as details about the victims began to surface. Each woman's life became reduced to headlines that often lacked depth and sensitivity. Rather than honouring their stories or their family's suffering, many articles emphasised Bundy's antics or his clever escapes from law enforcement, painting him as some sort of anti-hero instead of a cold-blooded killer. Public fascination with Bundy peaked during his trials when every courtroom moment felt like theatre. His ability to speak confidently and defend himself captivated audiences across America who were glued to their television screens or radios for updates. The lines between horror and entertainment blurred significantly during this time. While people feared what he had done, they also couldn't look away from the spectacle unfolding before them. Interestingly, this coverage also sparked discussions about societal views toward crime and punishment. As news organizations debated their own ethics in covering such cases, calls grew louder for compassion toward victims rather than glorification of perpetrators like Bundy. Even after his conviction and eventual execution in 1989 by electrocution in Florida State Prison, the media continued its complex dance with Bundy's legacy. Documentaries emerged that examined not just his crimes, but also sought insight into why someone could commit such heinous acts while charming those around them at the same time. The conversation shifted slowly but surely toward recognizing victims' voices over sensationalizing killers like Bundy. Yet echoes of that initial fascination remained ingrained within society's collective memory. How could one man hold such power over so many lives, and how did those who reported on him contribute to this tragic narrative? As we reflect on these questions today, it's clear that understanding media's role is vital not just for history, but also for preventing similar tragedies in the future. After the chaos of Ted Bundy's crimes, a palpable shift occurred in how society viewed safety and security. The fear that gripped communities led to a wave of changes aimed at preventing such horrors from happening again. People began to realize that they could no longer take safety for granted. The horrific details of Bundy's actions pushed lawmakers and citizens alike to rethink public safety measures, recognizing that vigilance was now more crucial than ever. In the wake of Bundy's terror, new laws and regulations were quickly introduced across many states. There's one significant change was the establishment of stricter guidelines for background checks, especially for those working with children or vulnerable populations. This move aimed to ensure that individuals with violent pasts would be less likely to slip through the cracks and secure positions where they could harm others. Moreover, the growth of community awareness programs became essential as neighborhoods rallied together to create safer environments. Neighborhood watch groups sprang up like wildflowers in springtime, encouraging residents to keep an eye on each other and report any suspicious behavior. Citizens learned to be proactive rather than reactive. They began attending workshops on self-defense and personal safety, empowering themselves with knowledge about what to look out for. Bundy's ability to charm his victims often made them feel safe around him. To counteract this illusion of safety, public campaigns launched educational initiatives about stranger danger and the importance of trusting one's instincts. Schools began incorporating these lessons into their curriculums, teaching children how to recognize potentially harmful situations and how to escape if needed. Law enforcement agencies also took note of the unique challenges presented by Bundy's crimes. They started utilizing advanced technology in investigations, developing better systems for tracking missing persons and sharing information across jurisdictions. Local police departments increased their collaboration with state and federal agencies as part of a larger effort to thwart predators before they could strike again. The media's role shifted too. It no longer solely focused on sensationalizing crime, but instead highlighted these new safety measures being implemented across various communities. And news outlets began reporting on successful community-driven initiatives aimed at enhancing public security, showcasing stories of individuals banding together for a common cause, ensuring that such tragedies would never repeat themselves. As time passed, the emphasis on safety transformed into a cultural movement that prioritized awareness over naivety. Parents became more involved in their children's lives, checking in more frequently when they were out with friends or installing tracking apps on their phones so they could always know where their kids were. With increased funding directed toward mental health services following Bundy's trial outcomes, society recognized that prevention needed a multifaceted approach encompassing both law enforcement strategies and psychological support systems. Communities began advocating for better resources dedicated not just to punishment, but also rehabilitation, an effort born from understanding the complexities behind criminal behavior rather than simply fearing it. All these efforts stem from one horrifying truth. Ted Bundy had shattered lives, but also sparked a resolve among people seeking change. The evolution of public safety measures post-Bundy represented not just new laws, but a collective awakening, a commitment by society not only to honour those lost, but also protect future generations from similar fates. Those who were taken, from Washington to Colorado to Florida, remain more than names. They were daughters, sisters, and friends. Honouring them means keeping their stories alive and refusing to let a single narrative overshadow the many lives lost. The legacy of Ted Bundy casts a long shadow over the world of true crime. Even decades after his spree, the impact of his actions continues to resonate. His case serves as a cautionary tale. Danger can lurk behind an ordinary facade. He became a symbol of how evil can hide in plain sight. Experts analysed his psychological profile after his capture, seeking to understand why he had committed such atrocious acts. They examined how he used his demeanour to lure victims into believing they were safe before he struck. That analysis opened up lasting conversations about mental health awareness and prevention. The media played an instrumental role in shaping Bundy's image during and after his trial. His good looks and intelligence led some to view him almost glamorously, creating an unsettling fascination with his persona rather than focusing solely on the horror he inflicted upon innocent lives. This portrayal complicates our understanding of serial killers. It allows us to grapple with uncomfortable questions about what drives people like Bundy to commit such heinous crimes. The importance of remembering the victims cannot be overstated. Each life taken was rich with promise. The stories woven through these events serve as enduring reminders to honour those who suffered by ensuring their stories are told. As we continue to tell these narratives, it becomes clear that Bundy's legacy is not merely about sensational crimes, but a reminder of how vital it is to keep our eyes open and advocate for safety today. As we reflect on the dark legacy left by Ted Bundy, it's essential to remember that the lessons learned from his horrific crimes are not just stories of the past. They serve a vital purpose in our present lives. Each victim had dreams, families, and futures that were taken by violence. The memories of Jorgen Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Naslund, Karen Campbell, and countless others remind us of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance in our everyday surroundings. In the years since Bundy's reign of terror came to an end with his capture and eventual execution in 1989, society has made strides toward improving public safety. Laws have changed, awareness on campuses has increased dramatically, and communities have come together to form support systems designed to protect individuals from harm. Yet we must ask ourselves, are we doing enough? Are we staying alert to potential dangers as we navigate our daily lives? The chilling truth is that Bundy was able to deceive so many for so long because he appeared normal. He wore a charming smile and dressed well. He fit right in with everyone around him until he didn't. This facade is what makes it imperative for us all to remain aware of our surroundings and those who inhabit them. We should never let charm blind us to caution. The media played a significant role in shaping Bundy's image during his trial and after his capture. They often presented him as an enigma, a clever monster who could easily blend into crowds without raising suspicion. While this portrayal captivated audiences nationwide, it also highlighted a critical issue, the danger posed by individuals who seem harmless at first glance. Today's world still faces threats similar to those posed by Bundy decades ago. Though times have changed, evil can still wear a mask that looks like any one of us, someone you might pass on the street or encounter at a grocery store. It is vital for us all to cultivate an attitude of mindfulness when out in public spaces or even within our own homes. Being vigilant doesn't mean living in fear. Rather, it means being conscious about your environment and remaining aware of what's happening around you. And simple actions like trusting your instincts can make all the difference in protecting yourself or someone else from danger. So how do we honour the memories of those lost? By taking action today, staying alert while walking alone at night, reporting suspicious behaviour when observed, engaging in community programs aimed at safety education, or simply talking about these issues with friends and family can create a ripple effect that spreads awareness far beyond what one person can achieve alone. Let's commit ourselves not only to remember but also to act, to ensure that no other families will have to endure such heartbreak as those affected by Bundy's heinous acts did. Awareness brings prevention. Prevention saves lives. As we close this chapter on one of history's most notorious figures, but keep alive the message behind their stories. Stay vigilant and look out for each other. As we take a moment to think about the impact of Ted Bundy's actions, and it becomes clear that reflection is an important step in understanding the past. The stories of his victims remind us of the lives that were forever changed. They were real people with families who loved them deeply. Bundy's case serves as a chilling reminder that darkness can lurk in the most unsuspecting places. He was intelligent and presentable, traits that helped him blend in while hiding horrific secrets. This duality teaches us to be cautious and aware of our surroundings. In thinking about Bundy's legacy, it's crucial to ask ourselves, what lessons can we learn? Awareness is essential. Communities have since adopted more stringent safety measures in response to his crimes. Reflecting on these events invites us to consider our own roles within our neighbourhoods and social circles. While Bundy's story will continue to raise eyebrows and generate intrigue among true crime enthusiasts today, it is vital to remember why these discussions began, to honour the lives lost and acknowledge their experiences as valuable contributions to understanding human behaviour and societal safety. As each new generation learns about Bundy through documentaries or podcasts like this one, they must grasp not only his sinister tactics, but also recognise the importance of vigilance against similar threats today. The memories of Jorgan Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Nasland, Karen Campbell, and all others should drive home the urgency of being informed and prepared for anything life may throw our way. As we bring this story to a close, the weight of what Ted Bundy did hangs heavy in the air. His actions were not just a series of crimes. They were a storm that swept through the lives of many and left devastation in its wake. Bundy's legacy is one of tragedy, but also of resilience. The fallout from his deeds led to changes that aim to protect future generations. Those who fell victim to his cruelty were more than names in a news report. Their families felt the pain of loss deeply, and their stories remain part of a larger narrative about safety and awareness. In the aftermath, society began to change. People started talking more openly about personal safety. Colleges implemented better security. Parents grew more cautious. Out of that uncertainty emerged movements dedicated to raising awareness around crime prevention. As we remember Bundy's victims, yes, let us also remember why their stories matter. They push us toward action rather than silence. Bundy was tried multiple times for his crimes, ultimately facing justice when he was sentenced to death for the kidnapping and murder of Kimberly Leach, among others. His life ended at Florida State Prison in January 1989 when he was pronounced dead by electrocution, a finality that brought some measure of closure, but did little to erase the scars left behind. The stories shared throughout this podcast are not simply dark chapters in history. They are reminders that every life lost represents potential unfulfilled, a future taken too soon by an unspeakable act. We owe it to those who suffered at Bundy's hands, and those who live in fear today, to ensure their voices are never forgotten. As we conclude this series, let's carry forward the lessons learned from Ted Bundy's case into our everyday lives. Be aware, be vigilant, and advocate for safety in our communities so history does not repeat itself. This is Murder at Midnight,